Hello and welcome to the latest Hagerty UK live stream. My name is James Batchelor and I'm a Hagerty contributor, and this evening we're going to be chatting with Niels van Roij, a hugely talented car designer. You'll no doubt have heard about rather a lot about him lately, because he's the man behind the absolutely stunning, the gorgeous Ferrari Breadvan Hommage. We're going to be finding out a lot more about that car, and there's going to be plenty of car design chat in the next hour or so. This is a live broadcast, so if you want to put a question to Niels, then feel free to pop it into the comments box and I'll do my best to put it to him. Now, Niels, thank you so much for joining the Hagerty UK community tonight. Lovely
Thanks for the introduction. Thank you, Matt, for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, and it's our honour. It's lovely to have you here. Now, I've been particularly looking forward to this, really, because I follow your work, and I'm sure, like everybody, I've been captivated by this homage to the famous Ferrari 250 GT SWB Breadvan, which that's what everybody calls it.
Yeah.
It took part in the 62 Le Mans 24 hours. What an amazing project to be involved with. I mean, a modern day Breadvan. Now, First things first, I mean, is this a replica or is it a celebration of that car?
Truly a celebration, at least is how we try to see it. When this specific client came to me and asked about a Breadvan, because it was his idea. Usually it's the idea that the client has and they come to us. I told him, we're not going to do anything retrospective. We're not going to make a copy. We're not going to make anything that is looking backwards. It's taking the recipe, but it's moving it as a whole forward into the future. So see it in one way like a 60s 911 and park a modern day 911 next to it. You'll see a bloodline. It's like, a grandpa and grandson. But there is, a whole lot different between the two as well. So yes, there is a bloodline, but we tended to be inspired by the past rather than, hold back by it. So yeah, really try to push it into the future.
Yeah, no, that's a really nice way of putting it. I mean, just explain to us what your reaction was when the client came to you with this. I mean, were you thinking, yes, fantastic, and then privately thinking, oh my God, how are we going to do this? Or were you immediately thrilled and sort of captivated by it?
Well, all of the above, I guess. It's an enormous honor to be able to work on a project like this with super talented craftspeople. I don't build these cars myself. They're wildly talented. Coach builder, Bas van Rome in this case, upholstery people, painters. It's a big group of very talented people that all come together. But yeah, the question was, it's mind blowing in many different ways, and there is a bit of pressure there because, of course, it's an icon, the Breadvan from the 62, and we really try to make it a new original. So a new car, a new iteration on this recipe, very radical recipe. I mean, it wasn't called Breadvan in the 60s because people loved it. It was, there was a bit of a shock. And when we launched our car, again, there was a bit of a shock. And I understand that, it's a provocative car, the 62 car, and so is our car.
Yeah. I think the reason why it's provocative is because, I mean, there's no two ways about it. It is an ugly car, isn't it? But the car you've created, I mean, it isn't ugly. I mean, that's quite a big difference, isn't it? I mean, was that going through your mind when you were...
Absolutely, yeah. It was a big aim. The 62 car is so radical in its, the way it's engineered. I can't really call it, with all due respect, but it's not really designed. It's not styled as such. They needed more air for the V12, so they kind of butchered two massive holes in the nose. A nose, by the way, that has changed over time significantly. It has been properly used and properly crashed as well, numerous times. So this nose was changed. Actually, the entire car was changed over time, the rear, the sides, the interior. So we did a lot of research before we started into documentation on the specific car we're talking about. how it came about, why it came about, what the story is behind it, and then again try to translate that into a modern car, which definitely had to be styled, not just built, as the 62 car was. So you will see the car has a lot more plan view, for instance. So seeing it from above, it's not 100% straight and flat. It has a lot of sculpture, a lot of subtle surface changes, beautiful curves. And that took quite a bit of time to get right, to again push it enough to be a fresh design, but also keep it to certain elements, certain parameters, if you like, that make it unmistakably a Breadvan. And for that, in the end, we changed with the team. We changed everything except for the windscreen. So every single body panel was either completely removed or only used as sort of a technical base, if you like, to develop a completely new aesthetic. So it's literally only the windscreen that is OEM.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. When you say you're having to style and design a car that wasn't styled, designed, it was built for a purpose. I hadn't thought of it like that. That's quite interesting. Now, what did you use to? I mean, you obviously didn't get the car, the real car, into the studio and thought, okay, right, well, like this. Did you just use photographs? I mean, what was the process?
So what I always do with any car that I'm commissioned to design, to work on, is research. It always starts with research. In some cases, it's let's say a more personal car. This is obviously a homage car. So the homage to the Breadvan. The Breadvan in this case is more central, if you like, than the client is. So the research depends on the type of research, depends on the type of car, the type of client. In this case, we did a lot of research, like I said, through books, through original letters from Enzo, an enormous amount of paperwork that we went through with a gentleman that had, I think, one of the biggest collection of paperwork in the widest sense of the word. Like I said, it was brochures, blueprints, letters from Enzo Ferrari, photographs, original photos back in the day. So how it used to be, the entire history of the car. It has been in the field for many years, for instance, in pieces, completely neglected. Nobody cared. And why was that? When did somebody said, well, that thing there in the mud, isn't that something to maybe restore or have a look at least? So this car and its journey was documented by us. We took, let's say, essential sort of steps in its life and made sure we had photos of that. And from these photos, we started to question what was important, what makes the Breadvan, the 62 Breadvan, a Breadvan, what makes it unique. Out of all the different interiors, for instance, that it had, black leather seats, blue Alcantara, which in the end we picked for our car, different steering wheels. Why are we going to choose for this or for that iteration of the original recipe? So to be able to answer that question, you first have to have the full overview, like a holistic overview, if you like, of the entire life of that project since 62, and then start basically selecting what is important, what makes the car unique, what is not that unique, where should we take more liberties when it comes to design. And from that, we started with ideation sketches, so very rough, quick sketches. We made hundreds of them, first side views only, so trying to capture the essence of the 62 car in just a few lines. Simple black big pen on a white sheet of paper, colored in Photoshop, very quickly again to give the client a very wide overview of possibilities. Think, for instance, of the rake. So the rake of the rear end, very typical for the 62 car. And that is actually the only thing we copied, if you like, 100%, like one-to-one. We tried many different rakes, and I think you might have some images as well that we send over, some of the sketches. The ideation sketches are the one on the red background. So you'll see it's a search to what is Breadvan, how far can we push the recipe to make it a modern car. And that was the one thing that we just saw, if we touch it a little bit, it just becomes a shooting brake, or it becomes, you know, anything else but not a Breadvan.
Yeah.
So we had to take that, but that's literally, it's the only thing that we copied one-to-one, that rake of the side view, in side view of the rear end. But again, it has way more plan views. If you look at the Breadvan from, or Breadvan Hommage from the top, you'll see it's way more rounded, way more sculpted. But it really starts with that search, that ideation sketching phase, which is very exciting, because you know, it's the first ideas you're going to put on paper, limitless ideas basically, you know. And we didn't just want to honor the 62 car, we also wanted to honor the base car, because that is a car that was picked by the client, by us, in, you know, had a good conversation about what would be a relevant car, and that to our opinion is a relevant car as a base vehicle, because it was the first front-engined V12 that the brand made since the Daytona. So they almost had 25 years of absence of that beautiful classical GT layout, the gentleman GT, and then the Maranello came, and in its essence, it is like a short wheelbase was. The base vehicle for the 62 Breadvan wasn't like necessarily a sports car. Obviously, the short wheelbase they took was adapted and changed for racing, but in its essence, a short wheelbase isn't a race car.
GT car, isn't it?
It's a GT
car, but it's a Grand Tourer. Yeah.
So we really wanted to have a car that matched that recipe in its base. So hence the 550. And because of that, we wanted to honor that base car as much as we wanted to honor the 62 car, because it's a very special car. It's a beautiful car. So, you know, you will see some cues of 550 in the design, which were enhanced. For instance, we through the ideation sketches, we had a look at different side vents, these gills, if you like, in the fenders, for instance. We've got sketches without any side vents, with radically different side vents. So it's not a matter of just doing whatever we can to make the car look different. That wasn't the goal. It was to, again, honor the 62 car and honor the base car. So what we did in the end was we kept the graphics, so the outline of the actual blackness, let's say, in the side view, in the side vent on the fender, but the surfacing, so the skin around it, was completely changed. It's running over the door now. It's way more sculptural, and that same type of sculpture is now repeated on the two vents behind the driver's head, let's say, on the side of the car, and of course in the nose as well. These two nostrils that were very crude on the 62 car, straight. They have a lovely amount of sculpture now. A feeling of thickness, if you like, a feeling of substance, and that was really what we wanted to achieve in the design of the Breadvan Hommage.
Yeah. No, it's lovely to hear it, because I mean, you know, let's face it. If you say, right, we're going to take a Ferrari 550 Maranello and we're going to try and make it look like and invoke the spirit of the Breadvan, it would have been very easy just to make it a shooting brake, really, wouldn't it? Just without the rear windows, but you know, the way you're talking about it there, it's there's just so much more that goes into it, and also it would just be very easy just to have the front of a 550 and it gets to the side window, and then from there onwards it's different. Yeah. But that's one thing. I've been looking at photos of it, lots and lots of photos of it, and it's very clear the design is very holistic. It's such a resolved design, and like you're saying, that must have taken a huge amount of work to actually get that, and constantly standing back from it and thinking, no, that's not quite right. We need to change this, change that. And
the weird thing is, especially with regards to, well, it's twofold actually. The base car is obviously a sports car, so it's low and wide. So as a human being, you're standing next to the car, you're looking down upon its roof. That's one. Two is obviously that very radical 62 car that we're paying homage to. So combining these two things, we've made a clay model, a full-scale clay model based on the actual car. Bas, the coach builder, made a frame on top of the base vehicle, to which he applied the clay, and then every so many weeks I came by and checked on the clay model, and that was redone and redone and redone and redone time and time and time again. Not because he didn't, Bas didn't look at the sketches and the renderings good enough, because we had full-scale prints of these sketches on package, so based on an actual 550 with regards to its dimensions. But standing next to a car, and that's why it's so important to do clay model, full-scale clay models, still in the car industry, nearly every car design studio does it. The human eye has to stand next to the car in real light, in real life. And walking around that car, despite the fact that he had, measured everything one-to-one, it was perfectly done. The first 3 seconds I was standing next to the car, I was like, we're going to redo it. Everything is going to come off again. Why? Well, because the perspective and the weird angle that you look at the car, like I said, from the top rather than from the back, as you would, almost see a normal car, if you like. This is so low, and with such a large surface area of roof, it just looked not exactly right. And in a way, I like to compare this almost to how the Romans designed their temples. They weren't just designing a temple, but they were taking into consideration the human being very small, looking up to that massive building, and they adjusted for the perspective of the human eye. They adjusted all beams and all the whole design. It was crooked in a way, so it looked straight.
Yes.
If they would have made it straight, it would have looked crooked. So, and that's basically what we're doing. We're fooling the eye through car design, through the clay modeling, and then the clay model was used by Bas, the coach builder, to make the body, the aluminum body, and he did that entirely by hand. So the classical way, which again suits the recipe of the car.
Yeah, it does. It really does. And the Breadvan story, I mean, it's one of those numerous stories that's sort of peppered through Ferrari's tumultuous sort of history, because it's not all wonderful. There are some bad tales and what have you. I mean, for people who don't know, the car was designed by Giotto Bizzarini, and the whole ethos of the car was, it was designed to defeat the 250 GTO, the very car he actually created when he was at Ferrari. But he and I think it was 7 others were fired by Enzo Ferrari because of a big dispute about how much involvement Enzo Ferrari's wife had within the company. And of course, Bizzarini goes to work for another company, and it was Giovanni Volpi di Misturata, I think it is, and he wanted a 250 GTO, and he wasn't allowed one. That's the creation of the car. It's such a fantastic story, isn't it?
Yeah. So our car, like the 62 car, is not anymore a Ferrari. It's not. We are not affiliated with the brand at all. It's not an official project in any regard. Neither was the 62 car. That's the beauty of the whole thing. People sometimes ask, so why are there no badges? For that reason, the 62 car didn't have them either. It had them when it was shipped to America a couple of years later, and somebody, glued a few badges on, but they were taking off again. It's not an official project, and neither is ours. Hence the fact there are no badges. It's again to honor that car. Yeah,
absolutely. Now you've also worked hard on keeping it looking, a little bit like a 550. I mean, you could have totally have changed the front half of the car. What was the feeling behind that?
Well, again, to honor that base car, and everything was changed. So the headlights are a lot more narrow. They're not running around the corner anymore. So they're more narrow. So we have more space for the nostrils. The entire front bumper was changed. The fenders, the doors. A very complex piece of coach building was design as well, but also coach building was to have the wraparound windscreen. It's like a visor Normally, if you would see a 550 from the side, you've got the A-pillar, so the windscreen, and it sort of runs like that, like basically any other coupe. But we wanted to have a windscreen that would visually wrap around like that, rather than over the roof of the car. Think of, let's say, a Range Rover or a new Mini, that kind of effect. But for that to work, we had to change the way the roof was set up, because normally the side windows run into the roof, basically, in a curve. So the roof was changed to run, let's say, down towards the side. Then we didn't just blacked out the A-pillars, as in painted them black. There was actually a fake shut line, if you like, made at the bottom of the windscreen, where the bonnet and the fender meet, and the door, and another one at the top, at the roof. So you will have a tiny little highlight that mimics the exact shape and curvature of the original shut lines on the 550. So, but that's, it's fake. There's no shut line. There's no separate plastic panel, let's say, as is the case with a Range Rover or a Mini attached to that. Then on top of the roof, so starting at the windscreen, there's a very tiny facette, which is actually hollow, that catches the light and takes your eye over the windscreen towards the A-pillar, towards the side window, all the way towards the back, where about a foot, let's say, 30 centimeters before the end of the car, there's a very soft fade out of that facette. Otherwise, it would intermingle with the facette, the big heavy facette at the rear end of the car. To get that right, this tiny little facette, which runs around the entire car in all sorts of complex geometrical shapes. You don't really see that, but it changes direction continuously. Was incredibly difficult for both in the design perspective to find ample space, if you like, for that feature to exist on the base car, as well as for the coach builder to make it. It was wildly complex. And then the painter, because some people might forget, it's not simply painting the car. The painter is basically sanding the entire car again. It's like less of like half of a millimeter, let's say. It's almost nothing, but these cars are filled. So the hand-beaten bodywork obviously has tiny little dents because of the hammer. These are filled with almost nothing of filler, and then sanded. And with just one, tiny little bit of too much pressure, it wouldn't work anymore. You wouldn't read that facette as one straight facette, but you would read that.
Yeah.
And the human eye is extremely sensitive to these tiny surface changes on big surfaces. And like I said, the facette runs around the entire car. So, it's really, all these people have to fully understand what we're trying to achieve here with regards to the design to make it work from sketch to finished product.
Yeah. It's just wonderful to hear the amount of work that goes into it. And I'm sure, and I'm sure some of the viewers would never have, even contemplated, the windscreen design at all. But can you just tell us a little bit about the client? Because, are they absolutely fascinated by this car? I mean, what was the inspiration behind it? I mean, why did they choose the Breadvan?
Yeah, because of the fact that it's an iconic car. So to honor a car like that, all my clients, of course, to no surprise, but are true car lovers. Different brands and different preferences, but of course, they're all very passionate about cars and about creating something new. I always try to, this is a co-design process. That's how I see it. So it's not me designing a car and then, this is being made. It's truly a continuous conversation with the client from the starting point, in this case, June 2018, I think, roughly, up until the end. Color and materials are designed for the specific car we're working on. The red paint you see is not a standard paint. We designed 8 shades of red. It had to be red, obviously. 8 shades of red specifically for this car, for this surfacing. Coach builder Bas made A4 sheets of aluminium that were painted by Fred, the painter, and not like you see, for instance, in a car dealership, sort of a miniature car with, let's say, full-scale paint on top.
Yeah.
I said it's not going to work, because you're going to see if there would be a metallic in it. You see the paint in an incorrect scale, if you like. So Bas made, in a way, cutouts of the car, of the fender, the rear fender, the haunch of the rear fender. So you can almost imagine holding a part of the fender in your hand, and understanding the flow of light and shadow, and then being able to better understand which color should be applied to that car to make it all work, to make the surfacing, the skin of the car work. So all these steps are steps that this client specifically, but basically all my clients, really enjoy. This creative process, this continuous questioning of everything we do, every step we make. How can we do it better? How can we make it more relevant? How can we make it aesthetically more pleasing? It's something that this specific client really enjoys. He's very hands-on himself too.
Yeah. So from that, I take it that he would be coming to the studio and walking around it, and you're explaining what's changed, and he's giving his opinion on that. So, I mean, you obviously like that kind of work, because I know lots of car designers who wouldn't like that. It's very intense relationship with the client, isn't it?
Well, I often, so in the early stages of the project, I visit the client usually, because it's very important for me in this specific project, a bit less so, but usually it's very important to know where they live, how they live, what their style is, what kind of architecture, furniture, cars in the garage, art on the walls. Like I said, in this case, obviously the 62 car is very important, but still, design presentations are usually at the client's home or business. So the initial design presentations were at his business, actually, where we had, I think, 3 or 4 layers of A3 pieces of paper full of sketches, and I think sort of 15 meters. So he had a big wall in his business, and it was just, sketch after sketch after sketch, and it's very enjoyable to walk through, all these sketches and all these choices together with the client. And on some of the ideation sketches, you see these little explanation marks, basically saying, remember, 3 months ago we had this conversation about changing the rake. Here I've done it. Doesn't work. Next, right? This one works. Why? Because of this and this and this and this. Remember, we had that conversation? Okay, so here you see of that conversation 5 different iterations again. So we could do this, we could do that, we could do that. What about the graphics? What about headlights, the tail lights, the glass area, everything. And the same goes for the interior. So, and then once the ideation phase has been done, and we're moving towards, in this case, the clay model, that was done at Bas, at his workshop, because he, in this case, built the car. He did the clay model, and thus the client and the design presentations are then based at a coach builder. So we're walking around the clay model together, presenting sketches there, or on the spot doing some changes. So again, it's very hands-on, and that's, that co-creation process is something that is very hard to come by for anybody, basically, bar, at OEMs, bar coach builders, car designers like myself. So that's truly the reasons for people to come to me, this co-design process.
Yeah. Did the client acquire the 550, or did you have to get that?
The base cars are always acquired by the client.
Yeah. And just tell me what I'm sure it doesn't affect you, but I'm obviously not in your position, so I'm just trying to sort of understand the whole process. What is it like actually making those first cuts into the 550? I mean, are you thinking, what are we doing? This could go horribly wrong. I'm sure you're not like that. I'm sure you're incredibly confident and you're carefree.
Well, You know, it is still, we always have a fixed photographer that follows the entire process. If possible, I am there, and definitely he is there when the first cut, as it is called, is made by the coach builder.
Yeah.
And it truly is, it always is a magical moment, because well, you know, some people say because there's no way back. Well, technically there is, because the coach builders are so good, they could just, you know, fix it again. But yeah, there is not really a way back after that anymore. It's truly the start of the coach building, of making this new car. And it's, yeah, almost to some clients, almost like a religious experience. You know, it's a bit like, you know, it's happening now. But yeah, it is always special, despite the fact I've seen it, you know, a few times now. But it is always something, yeah, truly special. It's, yeah, quite a magical moment. Still,
yeah. One thing that really strikes me about the car is that it's the tiny little attention to detail. It's like the perspex on the bonnet. It's the filler cap. It's the vent. I mean, you alluded to it earlier on, but just explain a little bit more of the process of picking out those certain things, and how many drafts of designs did you have to go through to create those tiny little details, which for a lot of people, they wouldn't actually notice.
Car design is regarded, if you like, in three different levels. So the first one is proportion, the proportional statement. And that's the reason why in the ideation sketches, we start with the side views. So imagine if I tell you bodybuilder, you've got an outline in your head immediately. If I tell you ballet dancer, the same thing, you know, and immediately there's an image that pops up in your head. This proportional statement is key to any car. So side view outline, basically the way this body stands on the road is telling you something about what this is. Is this an SUV? Is this a luxury SUV or a sporty SUV? Is this a sports car? What kind of sports car? You know, is the GT, mid-engine, front engine? So it starts with proportions to get these right, to get these spot on. Most people see the details, but it's very important to first get the proportions right before you go into details. So on the early ideation sketches, for instance, you don't really see much detail. You don't see these few filler caps. All wheels are always the same for the same reason. So people shouldn't focus on the wheels, on details like that. We first get the proportions right, side view. Then we start turning the sketch around, still in ideation phase. So very quick, very rough ideation sketches. We do bold stuff. We deliberately go over the edge. You know, we do a rake that is too extreme. We do air vents that are, you know, either way, like too subtle or not subtle enough. So just to see where the extremes are of the project. And you're sort of bouncing off the walls, and more you get guidelines. Okay, you know, this is too much, that's too much. We're going to ditch that, we're going to ditch that. And you get through like a tunnel, if you like, you know, selecting and selecting and selecting. Then you go to the, if you like, the second phase, the surfacing of the car. So proportion is about, let's say, 10 meters distance. Surfacing the skin of the car is about a meter distance, 2-3 foot. And again, the entire process starts all over again. So where do we put tension in the surfacing? You know, how much tension, how much muscle? Again, these two examples of the bodybuilder versus the ballet dancer, both are top athletes, right? Both have a lot of muscle power, but different muscle power. So now you can imagine probably 100 more type of people that you could design with different surfacing, with a different skin, man or woman, old or young. You know, all these steps, all these ideas are forming through ideation sketches, then evolving towards renderings made in Photoshop with the Wacom. So still handmade, if you like, with a pen, but just digitally. And then from the surfacing, we go to jewelry, and that's the third step, the last step in car design, about, let's say, 30 centimeters distance from a car. So indeed, headlights, tail lights, badges, chrome strips, you name it. The small stuff, fuel filler caps, that really make a project pop. And again, all these 3 layers, we design a lot. Car design is truly working for the dustbin. 99% of the work, is ditched, is thrown away, if you like. It's used, but in a different manner. It's used as a reference point. We tried this, we tried that doesn't work. And we know now because we see this next to that. So it's never really wasted, but it's not used as such on the car. It's not applied. And when it comes to jewelry, for instance, some people wonder, they have seen some sketches of the bullet mirrors that we, got really close to doing. But in the end, we decided, okay, let's really clean the car up. We took away the door handles. We took away even the door lock. So the car is now opened through a little button under the side view mirror. And the side view mirror was painted black. So it's the OEM side view mirror. We decided to not do that extra mirror on the bonnet or fender, let's say, just to make it even more pure, to get even more attention to the surfacing, to the skin that was handmade. So by reducing, you open up the car basically to be enjoyed in its purest form. The more you add, the more distraction to the design. So the black mirrors are sort of vanishing in either the background or on the black A-pillar and the dark window. So you read only this very simple graphic of windscreen and side window. And that's it, So then hopefully people see the skin, the surfacing of the car, and can appreciate it a bit more because there is nothing else that is distracting.
Yeah. Were there any compromises? I mean, is there anything you look at the car now and you think, actually, I wish we could have done this, or I wish we could have done that, or is it perfect in your eyes? I'm sure it isn't perfect because
no,
guys are never happy, are they?
That's quite spot on indeed. There's always the wish to make more iterations, to instead of having one full-scale clay model, to have 2 or 3 or 5 next to each other, so you can judge them next to each other. Rather than making a photo and thinking, okay, how was that again? Like 5 iterations back. Remember, we had this rake a little bit different and that facette around the corner. Of course, there's always more to wish, but any car, whether it's a Volkswagen Up, a Kia Picanto, or a coach-built one-off, is a compromise. Any car. Just as much as the Volkswagen Up has cost issues, we have the same. Developing a one-off car is difficult. So there is always a certain compromise. But I think within the parameters that we could work, I'm very satisfied with the outcome. I think it has a lovely stance, especially the rear. The hips are a lot wider. The wheels are bigger. Car is slightly lowered. It sits on Koni, so bespoke shocks. Big Vredestein tires, again needed, and not to make the wheels crazy big, but it just needed a little bit bigger wheels. Cars from the 90s and 2000s have these wheels that are just a little bit too small. So we needed these bigger wheels, 5-spoke wheels with bigger tires to fill up the arches nicely. Especially from rear three-quarter view, you can see how nice the stance is of the car. We changed a lot of the lower body. You have to imagine the base car has a spare tire in the boot, basically standing up straight. In some of the early photos at the Coach Builder that we shared on our social media, on which we actually showed the entire process of the car, from sketch to finished product, basically, you see that massive unit, basically, that's sort of hanging underneath the car. And it was then, again, that's why it's so important to make this clay model. We saw that whatever we would do, you would see it, because we need to lift the rear end up to make this car nicely horizontal and light from the rear end, which is very typical for the 62 car. But then if you raise up the lower section of the car, you'll see everything that's hanging underneath.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that was completely cut out, because of that, the rear end works, and because of that, you can also see the tires so well. If you would look at the base vehicle, the bumper goes almost straight down.
Yeah.
Like almost squarish, if you like. And ours is really, there's no rear bumper anymore. So it's one complete shell, no shut lines there. Again, reduction. That's what car designers like. Tucking in that rear end so you can see that Vredestein tire, head on, if you like, rather than it being tucked away by a bumper or bodywork. But it took a lot of work, but you can see what it did in the end. Car is wider, lifted up the rear, and then the wider tires, and that goes for the entire car. Like I said, there's not one body panel that wasn't changed. So bespoke headlights for the car, a bespoke front bumper, fenders, doors. It used to have pillarless doors and glass. Our car has plastic side windows, which feature like the little sliding door, if you like. If you go to the McDonald's through the drive-through, you can at least get your burger.
I'd love to see that car in the McDonald's.
Well, fortunately, the client did tell us that he is going to use the car. I don't think he's going to drive past McDonald's, but he told us that he's going to enjoy it on the roads, and that's fantastic, because there's no bigger honor than seeing people enjoy the car, do with it what is the whole idea behind the car to drive it.
The original car was a workhorse. It was designed for one purpose, wasn't it? So it's great to hear the owner's gonna live up to the original car's purpose, I suppose.
Absolutely.
A question's just come in, Niels, which I'd just like to put to you. And anybody watching, if you've got a question, do feel free to pop it in the comments box. Just a question it's about aero testing. Now, was any aero testing conducted, or was it just a sort of was the design more important than the way it sort of cuts through the air? And do you know if there are any differences between the original body and your car in terms of drag, lift, and downforce? I mean, do you know that kind of thing with your new car?
It depends a bit on again, the client wishes and the type of project that we do. In this case, we didn't do the aero testing because the car as such, the base car will never be comparable to a modern day V12 sports car. So whatever we would do, even if we would have tuned the engine, which we didn't do, again, for that same reason, we wouldn't be able to match any modern day V12. So again, for that same reason, aero testing wasn't, of paramount importance for the client. He really, he will drive it, and of course, we tested the car. We drove the car and made sure everything was working well. But aero as such, in this specific case, wasn't really a priority. If we look at, for instance, Silver Spectre shooting brake or Model SB or Tesla-based car, Silver Spectre is based on Rolls-Royce Wraith. These cars are, let's say, a bit more daily driver-ish. Model SB definitely is a daily driver. It's used since we handed over the keys to the owner as a daily driver by the owner. So for these cars, it's very important to make it quiet as well. The owner of Model SB is driving it from the Netherlands, where he lives, to the south of France, with slightly illegal speeds, perhaps, so it shouldn't make any noises doing so. And with regards to the Breadvan Hommage, there's an entirely new exhaust system, and I can guarantee you any wind noise is not really an issue sitting in their car. When we were making the movie that you might have seen on our YouTube channel, the introduction movie, official movie on the Breadvan Hommage, we had a camera car with like a beam and the director in their car, and I had a walkie-talkie, full volume in my ear when I was driving the car, and I was like, okay, let's stop. Tell me what I have to do. I'll do that, and then we'll stop again. You tell me what I have to do. Yeah, but it's so loud. So aero as such, to come back to the question, wasn't in this case. I can understand why it may sound a bit odd, because the whole chemtail idea was obviously an aero idea in the 62 car. But for this homage car, it wasn't the main priority.
Yeah. Well, that sort of, you sort of answered my next question a little bit, really, which is about, do you actually drive the cars? And if you do, I mean, how much do you drive them? Or are you scared because the car is for a client that you're going to, I'm not commenting on your driving here, Neil, but you're going to crash it or damage it in any kind of way? I mean, do you physically test the cars yourself?
I wouldn't say test. I mean, I'm a car designer. I'm not a car mechanic or an engineer as such. But I do drive all the cars myself, usually for video shoots or photo shoots. That's usually the first time a car is finished. We immediately do the shoots, and then it goes undercover for a certain amount of time in most cases. So it is quite literally usually the first opportunity that a car can drive. I will drive it, and that's for the photo shoots and the video shoots. And that is always truly special. I remember driving Adventum coupe or Range Rover based conversion. We had to drive it to the photo location rather than in a closed trailer. The client said, it's okay, it's not too far, you know, have fun, here are the keys. And it was in the early morning on the Dutch highway, and I was driving it, and it's almost surreal. In a way, it's like, you know, it was in the current lockdown that everybody's experiencing. I was alone on the highway in my car, so to speak. And that is always a very special moment. The same with Silver Spectre, the same with Model SB, and in this case as well with the Breadvan Hommage. It is truly, a very special feeling for anybody involved in these projects. So that the coach builders, the painters, everybody is attached. This is a personal thing for everybody. You know, it's not just business. It's something that comes from the heart. You know, one could even argue there's no rational reason to do business with me. You know, it's you know, why would you do that to any car, any, you know, usually a high-end car? Why would you cut it up? You know, why would you change the body? Well, it's not usually, for most of my clients, it's not the end product, but it's the entire 1.5, 2.5 years of co-designing that really is super enjoyable for anybody on the project. Yours truly, but also the client.
Yeah. Now I can imagine that alone time with the car that you've created. I mean, it must be something that's very difficult to put into words. But let's talk about other things than the Breadvan. Like you've been saying, you've done numerous other cars. There are shooting brake versions of the Tesla Model S and the Rolls-Royce Wraith. I mean, what is it about shooting brakes? Do you particularly love them? I mean, I do. I mean, I think anyone who loves cars loves the shooting brake, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've had a conversation with a journalist, and he called me Mr. Shooting Brake, and I was like, wow, that's it's a nice compliment. But I work on all sorts of cars, and of course, Adventum coupe can be called a lot of things, but not entirely a shooting brake. But yeah, the shooting brake has something magical. It's sort of the best of all worlds. It's sporty, luxurious, but it has that little bit of extra space. But it's not a big, massive people carrier. It's the right thing, the right recipe. And because of the fact there aren't many shooting brakes in mass production, and the client, for instance, of Model SB, he even argues that a shooting brake is only a shooting brake when it has been coach built. So Volkswagen's Arteon or the CLS by Mercedes, he said, lovely cars, but no shooting brakes.
I agree, actually. I'm totally with him.
Yeah, and he told me as well, which is an interesting fact, perhaps. The first time that he came to me, he said, Niels, I love my V8s, but my business is in advanced technology, so I want to show through car design, through coach building, that coach building has the future. So I want to do a project showing that it has the future. So it has to be a Model S. Back then, it was the only, let's say, decent electric car around. And I want to make a shooting brake. I was like, wow, okay, so we're going to move the B pillar and get rid of the rear doors. He said, no. It's going to be a 5-door shooting brake. I was like, well, but that's an estate or a wagon or a station car or whatever you want to call it. No, he said that's again a mistake that many people make because of, for instance, the Lynx Aventer based on the XJS
Yes.
jack. Beautiful car, Aston Martin DB4 and 5 shooting brakes. They were all 3-door shooting brakes. But he pointed out to me, like, Niels, go back in history, and he himself has a 1932, I think, Rolls-Royce shooting brake, which is actually, in his case, a 4-door car. So it has the Range Rover like, 2 doors at the back, let's say, and then regular 2 side doors. But he said, well, many were made with 6 doors because most shooting brakes were, for hunting parties in the UK usually. So, you had your mates and their tweed jackets and the guns and the dogs in the back. So you had all these doors, you needed the doors to make it a practical car. So the amount of doors, apparently, according to what he believes, doesn't matter. It's the fact that it is coach built that makes it a shooting brake. So, these type of stories, I've got loads of them because, all my clients are these interesting individuals that are super into a specific car or body type. In his case, he had shooting brakes, restored shooting brakes all his life. And now he said, Niels, I want to be at the start of a project rather than at the end of it, getting some rusty old whatever and restoring it over a couple of years, period of a couple of years. Let's create something new. And that's the reason, for instance, that car is green. So Model SB or Tesla-based car is green. Why? Well, he bought actually a British racing green Tesla as a base vehicle because he said, I want to honor shooting brakes. I want to honor coach building. And most shooting brakes were obviously made in Great Britain. Yeah. So it has to be British racing green. So then we were at the coach builder standing next to basically a body in white of his Model S. So completely naked car, all tech, all interior out, everything out. And, I told him, so this is going to be the car. What do you think of the color? And he was like, what do you mean? Well, I said, well, you told me the story about British racing green, honoring coach building, honoring the shooting brake. I said, it's fantastic. So how well does this paint do that job? And he was like, well, yeah, I was like, we have to design a bespoke color then, because if you're like, well, yeah, it could have been a little bit more this or that. Yeah. We're going to paint 1.5, 2 years of work in a color of which you now say, well, yeah, it could maybe. So we designed 10 different shades of green. For this gentleman. They can be found on our website as well. So from, again, an extreme to another extreme, a bit too dark, a bit too, in your face. Because if you see them next to each other, you start to understand, well, these are too extreme, too dark, too light, too whatever. That's it. And the color that we picked has it breaks the light in a very subtle way. Again, coach building, in my view, is about subtlety. So the highlights there where the sunlight hits the car are yellow and the shadows are bluish, which just means that the very subtle surface changes wouldn't be able to come out through the OEM British Racing Green do come out now. And then on top of that, we added a little bit of very vibrant, like fluorescent almost green, which came from the logo of his company. A company that he bought for €1 and was on the verge of bankruptcy, and he completely turned it around, and it's his life work basically. Yeah. That bright green is basically never to be seen. It's almost never there. And when he uses his car as a daily driver, there is one day a year that he walks around the corner, the sunlight hits the car on the right spot, and he sees his company standing there. And that, to me, is where coach building is all about. Yeah. Normal people would see a green Tesla, perhaps. Other people would see a green, weird Tesla that I haven't seen before. And he knows the meaning behind that color. And because of that co-creation process, this is not something that was obviously immediately put on the table. We're going to change this and that and that and that. This is, something that comes gradually from the client or from myself. And he liked that color so much that he said, can't we do something more with that color in the car? So we made a few Easter eggs in the car, again, subtle, He showed me around his house, for instance, and he had this very old house, a couple of centuries old, with a very modern kitchen. And then he pressed a button, and there was this wall just moving. I was like, okay, and then there was a cabinet. And he said, "This is not." He said, "It's not James Bond that I'm after, you know. He said, I don't want to, in a way, violate this old house, but I want to live in it. You know, this is my kitchen. I need to work, live, cook in this house. So this wall isn't there. This cabinet isn't there, and only when I need it, it's there." So what we did, we translated this basically into the glove compartment. The glove compartment of the Model S is his bespoke green. So when do you open your glove compartment? I don't know, once every 6 months, perhaps, right? So, but every time he does that, he's reminded of this entire story of why we picked the color, which one out of the 10, his company, So we also painted the rear view mirror in Flores green, as the color is named. We have the seat piping that is green. So again, very subtle. Most people won't see it or fully understand the meaning behind it. But that's when coach building gets really personal, which is usually the case when we work on a car like this. It's a highly personal project.
Yeah. No, well, Niels, if only you could understand how long it took me to choose the blue wall that's behind the camera. You would hate me as a client. You really would. But anyway, I just want to quickly talk to you about the another car which fascinates me is the Range Rover two-door that you've done.
Yeah.
As we know, that was a car which Land Rover had every intention of building, and then it got shelved at the last minute.
Yeah.
Are there any other cars in the past that you've looked at that have been failed projects and you've thought, yeah, I'd quite like to do that myself?
Well, in the end, in all honesty, the projects, the most project ideas are coming from the client. And I do help people. For instance, people come to me and say, well, Niels, I'm interested in, a homage to a classical car, but I'm not sure which classical car this should be. In this case, Advent Coupe, it was a gentleman who actually wanted to order SV coupe, but obviously that didn't work out. And that's where the conversation starts. So it's not, I don't have ideas on the shelf as such, because it's like a tailor-made suit. This suit was made for the Breadvan. I even have the blue Alcantara that we used in the interior was applied to the suit. The red here of the paint of the car. So again, subtle, but there. So again, they're tailor-made suits. So it wouldn't be right to have 20 tailored suits in your window as a tailor and then hope that somebody will come by that fits them. Right? So it's really the client is the starting point, and then I come in with ideas and with help and with inspiration and all of the above, let's say.
Yeah. Well, I think it's quite a compliment that if Land Rover can't build it, they come to you to get it done. So that's quite a compliment, isn't it? And I'm sure yours is a lot better, because the car that I saw, didn't look, wasn't the best. But
well, it's different. We really truly try to make it different in any way, shape possible. It has a straight roofline rather than the sloping roofline. It has a clean side rather than the fake air vents. Different size wheels. It has 2 door handles on the interior, so one for the rear passenger, one for the front. We truly tried. Of course, the base car is the base car. So in its essence, it's a 2-door, a coupe, a 3-door, whatever you want to call it, a Range Rover based car. But in a way, you have to see these as 2 different design studios working, 2 different Range Rover, Land Rover design studios working on the same briefing, coming out with 2 different ideas, 2 different iterations on the same briefing. So that our aim was to calm the car a bit down rather than bigger wheels and sportier. I said, well, despite the fact it has a lovely V8 with supercharger, it's never going to be a sporty car. It's a fantastic car, but it's not a sporty car. So why the sloping roofline? Why not open up the interior with more glass, more light? If you're sitting in the back of Adventum Coupe, it's, the amount of glass is amazing. There are no cars on the market that are so open, so airy, so light in the back.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think again, what we tried is not to copy anything. We tried to make a new original, similar again to the Breadvan Hommage there.
Yeah. No, it really is a stunning piece of design. It really is. I'd just like to end on a couple of questions that have come in.
Sure.
Niels. Lucius says, what's easier to work with, aluminium or fiberglass?
Well, again, I don't make the cars hand-on myself, and we don't do fiberglass. So
that's answered that question then.
Yeah, Silver Spectre has been made in carbon fiber.
Yeah.
And Adventure Coupe and Breadvan Hommage have both been made in aluminium. Yeah. So different processes. Not one in particular is easier or harder. It's just a different way of constructing a car.
Different way of doing it. And lastly, Arturio asks, have you ever thought about making a car out of magnesium metal? Like a Ferrari, I know the magnesium metal, you can't weld to it, but you have to heat it up to where you can shape it.
It's an interesting question. No is the answer, but who knows what's going to come up. It was the reason why Bugattis, obviously, they couldn't be welded either. The Atlantique, that's the reason why it has this spine, because they were riveted together, basically.
Yeah.
Because a few went up in flames, and they were like, okay, let's not do this anymore. Let's not weld. Let's do it in a different way. So, but for now, it's usually a combination of aluminium and carbon fiber, or either of the two.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Niels, we're going to have to bring it to an end for today. Time has flown by. I can't believe the time already. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Likewise, James.
I really do wish you the best of luck, and thank you for joining us for this Hagerty live stream.
It was a true pleasure. Thank you for having me, James, and thanks to Hagerty too.
Well, that's it for today's Hagerty live stream, and hopefully you can join us again for another live show in the not too distant future. But for today, thanks for watching and goodbye.